Welcome to Across the Ocean, a special podcast series from global Slovakia. Each week, we bring you a peek into our new book, Across the Ocean, How Slovaks Settled America, written by Zuzana Pavlovic and Gabriela Beregaziova. Through powerful excerpts and timeless voices, we uncover the hopes, hardships, and heart of the Slovak immigrant journey. Today's story takes us back in time, into the lives of those who dared to dream of a better future. Lipiny, spring 1894, the land that Slovaks tenderly called Slovenska Zem, was still merely Upper Hungary. Here, where the peaks of the Tatras pierced the clouds, people had lived for centuries with the rhythm of nature and the values of kinship. Their roots were as deep as the lindens that dotted the hillsides. Among them was Juraj, a humble farmer. As spring unfolded, he tilled his narrow strip of rocky soil. The last two harvests had yielded little more than disappointment, and doubt weighed heavy on his heart. He mixed his seeds with blessed crumbs from last Christmas, clinging to tradition and hope. Juraj and his wife Anna had two children, Jakub and Marienka. And though neighbors thought them fortunate, the truth was harder. Hunger sometimes pressed close, and the family prayed in secret for better days. Yet spring carried with it the promise of new beginnings. Juraj rose before sunrise, carrying a few slices of Anna's rye bread into the fields, dreaming of wider lands, abundant harvests, and a home where his children would never know hunger. What he didn't yet realize was that he was sowing more than rye. He was sowing the first seeds of a dream that would one day carry him far beyond these mountains. Back at their dreve Netsa, Anna baked bread with patience, prayer, and skill passed down from her mother. The children watched eagerly, knowing she would make small flatbreads just for them. Around the oak table that evening, the family shared more than bread and stew. They shared laughter, stories, and the quiet joy of being together. Anna looked at her husband's tired hands, their children's rosy cheeks, and whispered, "May it always be so." But destiny was already in motion, and soon the Sobotas' lives and the life of their entire village would be touched by forces far greater than themselves. Thank you for listening to this episode of Across the Ocean. If today's story touched you, you'll find even more in our new book, Across the Ocean, How Slovaks Settled America, a moving historical novel that brings Slovak immigrant history to life. You can learn more about the book and about Global Slovakia's mission to share Slovak heritage with the world at globalslovakia.com. Until next time, may we all remember the courage of those who crossed the ocean before us. Welcome to Across the Ocean by Zuzana Pavlovic and Gabriela Beregaziova from Global Slovakia. This September, support our Kickstarter and pre-order your copy of How Slovaks Settled America. Each week we share powerful sections that bring the Slovak immigrant journey to life. Now, let's return to Lipiny in 1894, where faith, tradition, and family carried Slovaks through both joy and hardship. Episode 2, Seasons of Faith. That year, it rained on Good Friday. The village elders said that rain on this holy day was a promise of a good harvest. Juraj, like countless farmers before him, watched the sky with reverence. He believed God wrote messages into creation, subtle omens meant for those who knew how to see. And so the gentle drizzle affirmed what his heart longed for, that this year his land and his family would be blessed with abundance. It was with this hope that the Sobotas stepped into the Easter season. On Sunday morning, Anna dressed the children in their finest kroje. Marienka stood still as her ribbons were tied, while Jakub beamed in his tiny vest. proud to look like his father. The Easter basket, carefully prepared, carried not just food but layers of meaning. Ham for prosperity, eggs for rebirth, salt for health, and sweet bread for Christ's sacrifice. Anna draped it with a cloth embroidered by her grandmother, as if all the women who came before her walked with her to the church. The path to the whitewashed chapel wound past plum trees and neighbors' gardens. That morning, it seemed to Anna that every ancestor walked beside them. Inside, dozens of baskets lined the altar, and the congregation gathered in their customary way. Men at the back, women in the pews, children in front. As the organ filled the air, the village of Lipany drew strength from their traditions, from one another, and from the steady rhythm of faith. But fate had other plans. By summer, the potatoes, planted with such care, fell prey to a mysterious rot sweeping across Europe. The rye fields yielded little. The promise of Good Friday's rain had been false, and by autumn, another poor harvest left the Sobotas with dwindling supplies. From dawn to dusk, Juraj and Anna labored. Their hands blistered from tying bundles of rye, their backs bent digging potatoes one by one. Yet when the last wagon rolled into the barn, their faces fell. Despite all their prayers and toil, nature had withheld its bounty again. Was this a test? A punishment? Or simply bad fortune? These questions haunted them as the long winter of 1894 set in. Anna inventoried their stores: potatoes stacked in baskets, mushrooms strung up to dry, jars of sauerkraut glowing faintly in the dim light. She knew in her heart it would not be enough. Fear, ancient and familiar, settled in her chest. Still, Christmas came, and with it, rituals that gave courage. The table was laid with straw to recall Bethlehem, and a chain was wrapped around its legs to keep the family united. Juraj led the prayer. Anna touched honey to the children's foreheads for sweetness in life. And the feast began. Thin wafers, mushroom soup, dried apples, bal key drizzled with honey, and plump dumplings filled with sauerkraut. For a moment, the children's laughter and full bellies banished the heaviness from their parents' hearts. But when the candles burned low, Juraj and Anna's whispers returned to the same worry. They could not survive another failed harvest. Something would have to change. By February 1895, they sat by candlelight, counting their meager savings. Anna's embroidery brought in a few coins, Juraj's wood carving another small income. But the dream of buying land, of building a secure future, seemed impossibly far. Even their children's education was fraught. Jakub and Marienka shared one pair of boots, taking turns walking to school. The teacher there spoke only Hungarian, mocking their Slovak tongue. Little wonder they preferred tending goats, chickens, and a single mischievous piglet, where laughter replaced shame. Life in Shawrish County offered few choices. Boys became farmers, girls became wives. The Sobotas' children were already learning these roles. Jakub watching the skies beside his father, Marienka gathering eggs with her mother. And so the rhythm of life carried on. Familiar, predictable, but unforgiving. Still, great journeys often begin not with grand gestures, but with small things. And for the Sobotas, change would begin with something as simple and as fragrant as a string of smoked klobasa. But before that turning point, let us turn our gaze across the Atlantic to a very different world, one that would soon call to families like the Sobotas. Thank you for listening to Across the Ocean by Zuzana Pavlovic and Gabriela Beragaziova. If today's story moved you, Support our Kickstarter and pre-order How Slovaks Settled America today. Learn more about the book and Global Slovakia's mission at globalslovakia.com. Until next time, let's remember the courage of those who crossed the ocean before us. Welcome to Across the Ocean from Global Slovakia. This September, support our Kickstarter and pre-order your copy of How Slovaks Settled America. Each week we share powerful sections that bring the Slovak immigrant journey to life. Now, let's cross the Atlantic to the booming United States of the 1890s, where industry roared and the hunger for workers reached all the way to Slovakia. Episode 3. The American Emperor Calls. Across the ocean, the mighty engine of the Industrial Revolution roared with ferocity. Factories rose like mushrooms after rain. Railroads crisscrossed the land, linking cities that seemed to appear overnight. But this miracle of progress came at a price. Beneath the surface, coal miners dug deeper into darkness. Above ground, steel mills blazed with fire. The once clear skies grew thick with soot. Streams ran gray with waste. America thundered day and night with an insatiable hunger for workers. The Irish were the first to answer. They worked hard, only to find dreams of prosperity shattered by starvation wages, 16-hour shifts, and perilous conditions that claimed countless lives. When they demanded dignity, decent pay, shorter hours, safer workplaces, the captains of industry turned away. Profits mattered more. If the Irish refused, the factory barons would find others. Their gaze turned eastward, to the Slavs of Europe. Strong, healthy, forged by centuries of hardship, they seemed the ideal labor force. But even the most desperate man would not abandon his homeland without persuasion. So the barons sent their agents, polished, silver-tongued dreamweavers. These men, with gold watch chains glinting in the sun, paraded through villages with the confidence of kings. They spun dazzling tales of a benevolent American emperor pleading for Slavs to come. They promised streets paved with gold, jobs for all, fortunes waiting to be claimed. And so, village by village, men began to listen. They began to dream. February 1895, Lipany. On a bitter winter night, Juraj Sobotas carried his prized smoked sausages to the local inn. His family's recipe, handed down through generations, was cherished across the village. The sausages paired perfectly with bread, onion, and a glass of slivovica. But this evening, Juraj found more than customers in the dimly lit tavern. He found a stranger. The man's gold watch glimmered, his leather boots shone. With a booming voice, he spoke of America, of glass towers rising to the heavens, of streets rich with opportunity. Farmers leaned forward, captivated. That night, they drank less of plum brandy and more of the intoxicating dream called America. Juraj stared at the photographs the man produced. Cities of steel and glass, unlike anything he could imagine. Could this be real? Could America be the answer to his prayers? For generations, the Sobotas had lived and died within sight of the same church tower. Bound by land, tradition, and the legacy of feudalism, their world had never stretched beyond the village hills. Only decades earlier, peasants like his grandparents had been tied to the soil, forbidden to leave. But revolution in 1848 had broken the chains of serfdom, granting peasants freedom for the first time. Freedom without resources, however, was like a plow without a field. Poverty still pressed hard. So when the so-called American emperor came knocking, Slovaks listened. What began as a trickle of adventurous men soon swelled into a flood. Year by year, Thousands set sail for distant shores. A fever swept Slovenska Zem, burning away centuries of tradition with the promise of change. And in the dim glow of the Lipany tavern, Juraj Sobota felt its spark in his own heart. Thank you for listening to Across the Ocean by Zuzana Pavlovic and Gabriela Beragadziova. If today's story moved you, support our Kickstarter and pre-order How Slovaks Settled America today. Learn more about the book and Global Slovakia's mission at globalslovakia.com. Until next time, let's remember the courage of those who crossed the ocean before us. Welcome to Across the Ocean from Global Slovakia. This September, support our Kickstarter and pre-order your copy of How Slovaks Settled America. Each week, we share powerful sections that bring the Slovak immigrant journey to life. Today, we follow Juraj into the heart of America's coal country. This is a story of toil, isolation, and the steep price immigrants paid for survival in the New World. Episode 4: The Price of Gold. November 1895. The weary Slovak newcomers reached the outskirts of Pittsburgh, expecting streets paved with gold. Instead, they found skies choked with soot, rivers turned gray, and men who looked like ghosts, broken by endless shifts in the mines and mills. For Juraj Sobota, there was no turning back. Debts weighed on his shoulders. His family in Lipany waited for every coin he could send. He and his companion Michal signed on at the Duquesne mine, where a roster of 120 names already bore dozens of Slavic surnames. Work was immediate, but only if they purchased their own tools. The company store stripped them of the little money they had left. The next morning, they stood at the mouth of the mine. Juraj stared into its hungry darkness. Was this the price of the American dream? Dear listener, coal mining in the 1890s was one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Explosions, collapses, toxic gases, any shift could be a man's last. Even survival came at a cost. Years of breathing dust condemned many to black lung, a slow suffocation that turned their final days into a struggle for air. To Anna, waiting in Slovakia, Juraj was her world. To his employers, he was a line in a ledger. While she prayed for his safe return, they measured his worth by the tons of coal he hauled. Still, Juraj endured. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, he clawed at the black rock. Each $1.50 earned was another step toward his goal, saving $1,000 to return home triumphant. But the darkness took its toll. A farmer's soul is made for open skies, not tunnels where daylight rarely shines. Surrounded by weary men stumbling into saloons, Juraj swore to resist. He walked past the whiskey dens each night, saving his pennies, holding to visions of Anna and their children. And yet, the silence, the distance, and the endless grind pressed in. When the bottle offered forgetfulness, even strong men faltered. Juraj was no exception. One glass turned to two, then many, and soon the man who had promised himself never to bend found himself stumbling into the shadows he once despised. Back in Slovakia, Anna carried her own burdens. Each season was a battle against hunger and loneliness. She prayed, she worked, she held her children close, but each letter from America brought less comfort as the man she loved slipped further into darkness. Dear listener, this was the true price of gold. Not only the lives lost in the mines, but the families fractured across an ocean. And so we leave Juraj here, caught between duty and despair. What will become of him and of Anna, waiting faithfully in Lipany? Thank you for listening to Across the Ocean by Zuzana Palovic and Gabriela Beregaziova. If this story moved you, support our Kickstarter and pre-order How Slovaks Settled America today. Every pledge brings us closer to printing this novel and honoring the courage of nearly 1 million Slovaks who dared to dream of a better life. Find the link in the show notes or visit globalslovakia.com. Until next time, let us remember the price our ancestors paid and the strength they carried across the ocean. Welcome to Across the Ocean from Global Slovakia. This September, support our Kickstarter and pre-order your copy of How Slovaks Settled America. Each week, we share powerful sections that bring the Slovak immigrant journey to life. Today, we follow not Juraj, but Anna, a young mother who dared to cross the ocean in search of her husband. Episode 5, A Woman's Courage. Lipany, 1895. With Juraj gone, Anna shouldered the weight of the farm, the house, and the children. Her days began at dawn, hauling water, chopping wood, tending the animals. Her hands, once soft and dainty enough for embroidery, became cracked and raw. And yet, each night she whispered prayers for Juraj's safety, each word a fragile thread stretched across the ocean. But prayers could not fill the silence in her bed or the ache of absence that grew sharper with every season. Letters arrived, slow and uncertain, sometimes carried to her by neighbors to be read aloud. She held them like sacred relics, pressing them to her heart. But as the months passed, hope alone was not enough. So Anna made a choice that few women of her village dared. She gathered her 2 children and resolved to follow Juraj to America. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it, not just for herself, but for her family. Historical note. Anna's decision was part of a wider shift. By the 1890s, Slovak women were beginning to emigrate as well. Many found work in textile mills in New Jersey or as maids in American households. Their wages sustained families across the ocean and helped carve out a place for Slovaks in the New World. Quietly, but powerfully, these women became the backbone of immigrant communities. July 1896, the crossing was long and weary. Anna rationed her provisions carefully, often sacrificing her portions so the children could eat. Yet, amid the hardship, wonders appeared. Jakub spotted a whale breaking the surface. Marienka marveled at a strange yellow fruit, a banana, handed to them by a kind stranger. And when Lady Liberty rose from the mist, torch alight, Anna drew her children close. The sight was both a promise and a challenge. In New York, the great station pulsed with languages she recognized. Slovaks, Poles, Italians, Hungarians, all carried the same weary look of people chasing hope. Anna clutched her children's hands and boarded a train west. With her last coins gone, she prayed no conductor would ask for tickets. Pittsburgh, 1896. At last, she reached the city of smoke and soot, where she believed Juraj was waiting. Strangers, touched by her dignity and determination, offered bread, fruit, even toys for the children. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Perhaps she thought they were finally at the end of their long road. But at the company office in Duquesne, reality struck.
Mr. Sobotas no longer works here,
The clerk said flatly.
he left months ago.
The words shattered her. After thousands of miles, Anna found herself in a foreign land with 2 hungry children and no husband to greet her. Thank you for listening to Across the Ocean by Zuzana Palovic and Gabriela Beregaziova. If Anna's courage moved you, please support our Kickstarter and pre-order How Slovaks Settled America today. Your pledge helps bring this novel to life and honors the families who carried their dreams across the ocean. Find the link in the show notes or visit globalslovakia.com. Until next time, may we all remember the strength of a woman's courage. Welcome to Across the Ocean from Global Slovakia. This September, support our Kickstarter and pre-order your copy of How Slovaks Settled America. Each week we share powerful sections that bring the Slovak immigrant journey to life. Today's episode is a turning point, a story of reunion, truth, and a choice that could reshape one family's future. Episode 6, Reunion and Revelation. Pittsburgh, July 1896. Inside St. Elizabeth's Church, Anna's candle trembled in the draft as if it too had crossed an ocean. Beeswax, incense, and her whispered Slovak prayers wrapped the moment in a protection she desperately needed. Then a voice answered, in her mother tongue. A priest with kind eyes offered water, apples for the children, and news. Juraj lived. He worked hard steel, but grief had hollowed him out. The city's taverns had done the rest. She searched through dusk and shift change until the mill gates emptied into lamplight. And there he was, head bowed, shoulders slumped, eyes dulled by sorrow. Jurko? Her voice was barely more than breath. He turned, stunned by a vision in embroidered croj and loosened golden hair. For a heartbeat, he thought it a trick of whiskey and smoke. Then Anna's words, soft, certain, found him. Here I am, Laska moja. We have come to find you. Reunited at last, the Sobotas began to stitch ordinary days back together. Juraj put the bottle down. Baseball with Jakub, the circus with Marienka, Friday holubki in a kitchen that smelled of cabbage, garlic, and home. Little Slovakia cradled them, shops with familiar spices, a parish that spoke their language, neighbors who understood without many words. For a season, they remembered how to laugh. But Pittsburgh exacted its toll. Wages that once seemed rich dissolved into rent, coal, bread, and debt. The mill's heat scalded hope, and soot crept into every crevice of their lives. America gives and takes in the same breath. Anna told the neighbor woman, who listened more than she spoke. Juraj worked Sundays now. The day of rest became another shift. Family time thinned to moments in the gray between sleep and dawn. Historical note: back to the farm. Across the 1890s, reformers, church societies, railroads, and immigrant-led colonization groups urged industrial workers to reclaim rural life on American soil. Land companies and state boosters promoted resettlement. Parishes hosted informational meetings. Mutual aid lodges spread the word. For many Slovaks, this back-to-the-farm ideal sounded less like policy and more like memory. Dignity in work, roots in land, children growing under open sky. One afternoon, a yellowed flyer found Juraj in the church vestibule. Navratki v dieku, return to the farm. Arkansas, it said. Acres to own, not rent. A chance to trade smoke for sunrise. He tucked the paper into his coat, and something old stirred. The same feeling he'd had the night a stranger first spoke of America in a Lipany tavern. The idea took hold at their small table. Not to go back across the Atlantic, but back to the land, here. The risk was brutal. Their savings covered only part of the cost. Juraj would have to keep grinding in the mills for a while, sending money south. While Anna and the children began again among strangers and prairie grass. Another separation, another leap of faith. Yet everywhere they turned, the city pressed its case against staying. The air that scraped the lungs, the danger of the furnaces, the fear that their family time would always be measured in minutes. One evening, over a plate of holubki, and a silence that said more than words, Anna's voice finally broke. Juraj, laska moja. There must be another way. Arkansas promised acres and an honest fight with weather and soil instead of iron and fire. It promised a garden for the children and a horizon not cut by smokestacks. But promises are not guarantees. To choose it meant risking the little they had finally rebuilt. Revelation, then decision. They walked through little Slovakia at dusk, past the butcher's laugh and the parish door standing ajar, and counted what they could not bear to lose: their children's health, the warmth of their table, the thread of their language, the hope that work might also bring peace. The flyer crackled in Juraj's hand, like tinder. And so, dear listener, the question stands before them like a crossing with no signpost. Do they remain in Pittsburgh's furnace, or stake everything on a prairie they've never seen? Thank you for listening to Across the Ocean by Zuzana Pavlovich and Gabriela Beregaziova. If this chapter moved you, please support our Kickstarter and pre-order How Slovaks Settled America today. Your pledge helps bring this novel to life and honors the courage of families who risked everything for a future they could not yet see. Find the link in the show notes or visit globalslovakia.com. Until next time, may we all find the courage to choose the road that leads us home.